Talk and Power, your motorsport and motoring radio show. Now on 88.5 FM, The Valley Comes Alive. And podcasting across iTunes and talkandpower.com.au.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Talk and Power podcast, episode 148. And I'm joined with our co-host, Simon Gonzo Travellini, over there. How are you, Simon?
I'm still yielding a bit of a cough, but I'll try and get through tonight without destroying everyone's eardrums.
This podcast was brought to you. We're recording this at the Hen House studio here in Osborne Park. So thanks to the guys at the Hen House. They look after us and they're a great bunch of guys to work with. Simon, I guess this podcast is a bit of a special episode. It's episode 148, not by number, but I guess what we want to talk about. Episode 77, and I'll get those people to go back and have a listen to episode 77 at some stage. But episode 77, we started talking about the great EV debate, and what we believe is not so much purposely being misled, but we believe that there are some aspects of the EV movement that are not quite right, and the push towards an EV vehicle is probably not in our best interest right now.
I think that we've been talking about this for, as long as the podcast has existed and even before that. Ultimately, the goal, as I understand it, is to save the planet. That's ultimately what the goal is. So when neither of us are climate deniers, if the science says that the planet's getting hotter, then we're not in a position to argue with that. But I believe that globally, and this just isn't Australia, but we're going to focus on Australia tonight, globally, we should be implementing what is known as best practices. Now, when you look at best practices, you have to do a cost versus return assessment.
Yep.
So we're being told repeatedly by the media, by politicians, that cars are the problem, and that CO2 emissions from cars is essentially what's warming the planet up. And I have not been able to find a shred of evidence. I've approached as far up the ladder as NASA, because they run climate.org, which is, the definitive climate place to look for information. I've approached our own Minister for Climate Change. I've approached the Climate Council. I've approached the CSIRO, and I've not had a response from anyone. I've had some heated email debates with some of the scientists at NASA, with regard to CO2 in the spectrum of greenhouse gases, because surprisingly enough, CO2 is right down the bottom. The greenhouse gas that is responsible for well over 50% of the greenhouse effect that the globe sees every day is steam. Now, it's interesting that steam has such a profound influence on the temperature of the globe, because if we decide to go to hydrogen, now they keep saying hydrogen's a renewable. Hydrogen is manufactured, so I'm not sure. The fact that it turns into water after you burn it, and then you can split the water again, that's kind of debatable if that's really a renewable. I mean, it's renewable in the sense that it becomes water and then you can turn it back into hydrogen, but it's not like sunlight where it just appears every day. What I mean? Or a tree that you plant and it grows into a tree. Hydrogen, when you burn it, you end up with steam. So we're going to convert from petrol, which gives off carbon dioxide, to, which is right down the bottom. Now how much down the bottom? CO2, the next bad boy is methane, which is natural gas. And when you hear about them talking about blue energy, so you've got black energy, which is coal, blue energy, which is natural gas, and green energy, which is solar, hydroelectric, etc. They're talking about methane. Methane is 30 times worse than CO2, and steam is an amazing 100 times worse than CO2. So if we converted all the cars on the planet to run on hydrogen, we would accelerate the greenhouse effect to the point where there would be no salvation for the planet, in my opinion. Now, you're probably wondering how can a couple of podcasters like ourselves, on what credibility, what credentials do we have? Well, I grew up in the mining industry, and I got to tour, places like Port Hedland, Tom Price, Kalgoorlie. I got to see what goes on at these mines, and I worked in the mining industry for 10 years. My father and my uncle were responsible for opening up the northwest of Australia with an invention that was known as a wire rope or cable suspension, because in the early days of the northwest there was no sealed roads going to the northwest. They were very corrugated, basically tracks. And it was common for the suspension to fail on the trailers repeatedly on a trip, and the truck drivers to have to pull over and repair the trailers to make the journey. The wire rope suspension eliminated that problem and made the northwest a lot more accessible. And I got to see a lot of that growing up. My father took me to all these places, and I got to see it firsthand. We had dump trucks always in our yard at the factory. So I feel as though I have a good understanding of what happens on mine sites. And any of the grey nomads that might be listening to this on 88.5, it would be great for you to pay attention to how many diesel tankers you see driving to mine sites, because you would be astounded at how much diesel gets burnt every day. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of litres of diesel. These mine sites nowadays, they run 24/7. There is,
Christmas Day.
Yep.
Good Friday. Yep. They don't stop.
So, it's important that we understand the scale of this. Now, a lot of people will argue that mining brings a lot of money into Australia, and that simply is not true. I haven't done a figure as of today, but the last time I looked, the mining industry directly only employed 38,000 people. Now, you compare that to the auto industry. The auto industry directly employs 440,000 people, so well and truly over 10 times. So the money is a different story when you look at the money. So let's just take iron ore. We're exporting over 1 billion tonnes of iron ore every year, well over 1 billion tonnes. Now, a couple of years ago, I did some cost analysis, and it was costing the average iron ore miner around about $30 a tonne by the time the ore was loaded into the ship. Now, if you're selling the iron ore for $100 a tonne, you're making $70 a tonne profit. If you're mining 1 billion tonne a year, that means that these iron ore miners are making $70 billion a year. Now, is that money coming into Australia? Well, clearly not, because if it was, the Australian dollar would be worth 3 times the American dollar.
Yep.
The money goes into offshore bank accounts. A lot of it, we never see a cent of. We see a little bit of royalty money, but when you add up the amount of money that leaves this country and the amount of money that comes back in, there's no case to put forward with the number of people employed, with the amount of money that's coming in, the amount of money that's leaving. There is no case to put forward for mining.
Yep.
Right? The reality is that a handful of companies, even less than a handful of companies, are making huge profits that allows them to pay themselves in particular, and also their shareholders, huge dividends. And that also allows them to influence policy. Now, we've seen this with the Uber data dump. There was a lot of people when Uber came to town that were going, this seems very strange that the government would allow this to happen, because a set of taxi plates is, $250,000 to $300,000, and you've suddenly devalued those plates to be worth nothing. Now, a lot of people argue, well, they can't get flag fall. everyone's got a mobile phone now. So that's better than flag fall. You can book, have them pick up. Now, there's arguments to say, well, the taxi industry should have implemented something similar. I'm not going to argue with that. And there's arguments to say, well, Uber's a lot cheaper. That's not true. During peak time, Uber can be 10 times more expensive than catching a taxi.
Mm-hmm.
So why didn't the government stop it? Why didn't the government say, hey, hang on, we have special licenses, we have specially licensed vehicles that have to pass roadworthies regularly, and you guys are just going to come along and get some Camry and put an Uber sticker on it? These people, have they had clearances? Have they been checked out? There was a lot of assaults in the early days of Uber that were covered up. You'd hear something about it briefly and then it would disappear.
Why do you think the automobile, but the car as we know it, why is it perceived as the easy target? Because even in schools now, you're taught that the car is no good anymore. The internal combustion engine has seen its days.
The car's been vilified for a long time. Now, as to why, I don't know. And to be honest with you, Nick, I'd rather just talk about the nuts and bolts, okay? What I want to talk about is this mindset that out of all the things that produce CO2 in this country, the car is the one that's the problem, because that just simply is not true. And it's very cunning the way they've manipulated the figures. You cannot, you would think that mining as a whole would be one sector of CO2 production. You would think that would be, electricity production, mining, transport, civilian transport even, because that's what we're talking about. So we knew, and we said this way before the election, we knew that if the Labor Party got in, led by Anthony Albanese, they would push the EV platform, right?
Yep.
Now we have the climate change minister showing up at the climate forum in a Tesla, thanking Putin, of all people, for forcing this transition upon us. His exact words were, if you buy one of these, you'll never have to worry about the price of petrol again. But you will have to worry about the price of electricity. You will have to worry about the availability of electricity. I was in Fremantle 2 weeks ago, and there's near the Italian club in Fremantle, which is near the I don't know if it's called the Eye of Fremantle. It's got an eye on it, the big Ferris wheel. And there's a row of EV charging stations. So I'm not sure if they get free parking or if they get free charging, what the deal is there. I don't own an EV. I haven't looked into it. But out of those charging stations, I think there was 4 or 5, only one was operative. And there was a sign stuck to all the other ones. And it said on the sign that there was not enough electricity supply to power all of the charging stations. But the council put those there. So did they not do their due diligence? Now, something similar and actually more dramatic happened recently in Victoria, where a company that I deal with was asked to tender on fitting one charging station per apartment in this high-rise complex to, get ready for the EV. The company that quoted on it said that not only did that building have enough power going into it. Now, when I say power, we're basically talking about the size of the cable going into it. How you get around that problem is you fit large transformers and you run a higher voltage. So when you're driving and you see those large wires that are very, very high off the ground, like near Malaga, they lead to a substation which takes the very high voltage down to a lower voltage. And then when you're driving around your neighbourhood and you see those transformers that fry every once in a while, well, those transformers take the little bit lower voltage and then bring it down to the 240 volts that we use, okay? So they said there wasn't enough power going into that building, but there wasn't enough power going into that suburb. So it would be impossible to have all these charging stations without basically rewiring the grid. Now, that's one high-rise. Can you imagine the whole of Melbourne, the whole of Sydney trying to convert to EV charging stations? It's impossible. Now, this is a double-edged sword. So you've got that on one side, and then you've got the other side where you've got our own government announcing that they're going to shut down the Collie coal power station. Well, what are they going to replace it with? Now, if you had a government that was willing to say, we're going to go nuclear, it makes sense for us to go nuclear, that is clean energy, then I would say, well, you know what? They've got a game plan. They're working towards something. So when you look at it as a holistic approach, you take a holistic approach of looking at it. Nuclear is actually pretty safe and it's very clean, But we're not hearing about that. We're hearing about wind farms, and more solar. Now, the power generators that are privatised in other states, solar is a big headache for them because the sun comes out, the clouds go away, suddenly there's a big burst of energy, and they now have to slow down their existing energy supply to accommodate that. So maybe banks of batteries will help, I guess, but let's just take the banks of battery approach for a second with EVs. So let's say that you want it to be completely green and honestly green, not net zero green, green, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy an EV, I'm going to buy a battery pack, I'm going to get as much solar as I can possibly get. It would take you roughly 2 weeks to charge your car enough to drive 100 kilometres. That's the reality of it. And yeah, you can say, but I've got the battery. Yeah, but you need to charge the battery first. So you're still going to be relying on the grid, unless, of course, you only want to drive 100 kilometres every 2 weeks. If that works out for you, and I'm sure that there
would be people that work in that scenario. Yeah.
All right. So let's get back to what we're talking about. The current statistics. I'll let you take over from here, Nick, so we can. I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing my voice at this point.
No, we're talking about these statistics here.
These are the greenhouse gas emissions by sector, as reported.
So electricity and heat, 222 million tonne. That's in Australia. This is 2019, by the way. Agriculture, 136 million tonne. This is carbon dioxide, by the way. Transport, 102 million tonne. Fugitive emissions, 45 million tonne.
So for those of you that don't know, fugitive emissions is leaks in pipes, which, I mean, I don't even understand how they've calculated that. And if that is the case, why don't they fix the leaks?
Yep. Manufacturing and construction, 39 million. Land use, change and forestry, 22 million tonne. Aviation and shipping, 17.4 million tonne. Industry, 17 million tonne. Buildings, 15 million tonne. Waste, 12.4 million tonne. And other fuel combustion, 6.58 million tonne. So that was from ourworldindata.org.
All right. So if we switch to the CSIRO, we've got some conflicting.
Yeah, we do. This is the bit that I didn't get was here to CSIRO. Now, this is 1 year later, so this is for 2020. But energy burning of fossil fuels to produce electricity contributed to 33.6% of total emissions. Stationary energy, including manufacturing, mining, residential and commercial fuel use, 20.4%. Transport, 17.6%. Agriculture, 14.6%. Fugitive emissions, 10%. Industrial processes, 6.2%. And waste, 2.7%. Most of it flows, but the fugitive emissions, agriculture and transport seem to be the wrong way around there.
But the point is that you've got two CSIRO, I mean, those guys, in my eyes, are legends. I've always, as a child growing up, they were always science heroes to me. But you've got the two big boys here, and their data is like not a little bit different. It's way off whack. Now, add to this, you got Jennifer Rayner, who's a PhD, and has a half a dozen initials after her name. She's the head of advocacy for the Climate Council, right? She has stated transport is the second largest emitter of CO2 behind power generations, and she claimed that it accounted for 18% of Australia's total emissions. I'm missing something here because transport's number 3 on both the CSIRO and the, right? It's number 3. Nowhere does anyone look at mining as one unit.
That's a really interesting point.
Why is that?
CSIRO have a stationary energy, including manufacturing, residential, commercial fuel use, and mining is all jammed in together.
Yeah, but I think that that's not really 100% true either, because I believe that part of transport and part of agriculture falls into the mining envelope. Now, it's easy enough to calculate how much the mines use, because you've got two ways of calculating this. You know how many vehicles are out there. You know how much CO2 they produce every hour, okay? And then on the other side of the coin, you know how much diesel they use, and you can calculate from that how much CO2 is being emitted, because if you burn that much diesel, that's how much CO2 is emitted. Now, when it comes to the diesel, there's another interesting point that I'd like to make. Some mines, iron ore miners in particular, they don't get their diesel locally. And this is part of the reason why plants like Kwinana and other plants around Australia have been forced to shut down, because it's not economically viable anymore. So what they do is the iron ore ship that is carrying the iron ore to China, for let's say for argument's sake, that is loaded with diesel in bladder bags, and that gets unloaded at the port and gets dropped into the iron ore carriages and then taken. Now, what happens to those bladder bags, whether they get returned or they're just dumped, I don't know. But that's how they're getting the diesel, which doesn't help anyone in Australia at all. And it also allows them to, not disclose exactly how much diesel they're using.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you raised a really interesting point here, and you told me that it would be easy to find. I had all sorts of difficulty finding data on the fuel consumption or the emissions burnt from we'll call it a haul pack, and I just could not find. So you bring up the specs on the Komatsu version, the Westrac version. Sorry, I take that back. The Caterpillar version. And all those, I was unable to find anything. I had to dig. You actually sent me a link to a gentleman by the name of Vladislav Kojesevich. This was an excerpt from the Mining Engineer magazine, and he's done some data there. And I just pulled out one in particular, the Caterpillar 793D,
which is a bulldozer.
No, this was the dump truck.
Dump truck?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I missed. Yes.
Yeah, so this is
my
the
apologies.
793D at 30% engine load, right? I took 30%. He has all the data here from, he has 30, 20, 30, 40, and 50, but I took 30% because I felt that's where they probably operate at on average. That thing emits 370 kilograms of carbon per hour. Now, I did some maths, and that's the equivalent to 5,362 Toyota Camrys.
Now, I hope everyone...
Not hybrid Camrys either. Full petrol 2.5 litre Camrys.
I hope everyone listening, can just take a moment. So, one dump truck, one Caterpillar 793D dump truck emits the same amount of emissions in an hour as well. I mean, if they were running, and that was at 30%.
30%, yeah.
Okay, so it would be fair to assume that when they're going up the incline, they're probably at 100%.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah,
Yeah, and when they're just rolling around because of the fact that they're, so heavy, they're probably at 30 or more percent just driving around. And that 5,000...
362 Camrys.
Okay, so I want everyone listening to this to just have a bit of a think about that. So I believe that most people would drive, if you averaged it out, 2 hours a day. Mm-hmm. Would that be a fair assessment? The dump truck works 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't take long to see that you don't need many dump trucks operating to be letting off more CO2 than all the mums and dads out there.
Yeah, that number speaks volumes. 5,362 Toyota Camrys, and they're full petrol Camrys too, as I said before. That's an astounding figure.
Now, there's another interesting point that I'd like to make here. So I got out of the mining industry about 20 years ago. Back then, there was a manufacturer called Euclid, which is still around, I believe, and another manufacturer called Terex.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they specialised in what they call electric drive dump trucks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, electric drive for mining equipment has been around well over 100 years. Well and truly. Lee Bear, I could rattle off a dozen different manufacturers. There was a push in particular in Western Australia for market dominance by mechanical drive, and Caterpillar is the biggest, and then Komatsu would be the next one after Caterpillar in the mechanical drive market, right? If we had diesel over electric dump trucks now, to convert them to electric, full electric, without any diesel motor, would be fairly simple, because you just remove the generator and the diesel motor and fit it with a battery pack, basically an oversized cordless drill battery pack. And considering the point that I made earlier, the iron ore industry is making $70 billion profit every year. It's easy enough to fund the solar arrays that you need and the technology that you need to do that. So why are we so concerned with mum and dad's Camry?
Yep.
Why has that become the point that is being pushed? If we are trying to achieve zero, forget net zero. Zero is our end game. The planet doesn't care if you bought some carbon credits to offset your carbon. The planet only cares about the carbon dioxide that's getting released. So if that's the end game, then why aren't we looking at these big polluters? And why aren't we even talking about them? Why aren't we even grouping them together and saying that, look, mining is a big problem? When I did the maths on this, when I sent that email through to you, by my calculations, when you consider all the factors that go into mining accounts for 50% of our CO2 emissions now.
Yep.
50%. So electricity is roughly 30%, mining is roughly 50%, and the remaining 20% is made up from all the other little bits and pieces.
Yep. For those wondering, the Toyota Camry figures I've got from Toyota, and so that, look, I take that on board. I get 174 grams per 100 kilometre, and I worked out the Camry was travelling on average speed of 40 kilometres an hour. That's where I come to those maths. If you have any questions about that, just drop us an email or send us a message on Facebook. I can send you through my calculations there on how we came to that. But, the reality is we're not trying to say the Camry is a great car, or I just used that as a good example because globally the Camry is probably one of the most recognised cars.
Look, I think it's an excellent example because we want to focus about Australia. This is about Australia, and let's not forget that we're hearing all this rhetoric. Australia accounts, by your calculation, 1.18% of global emissions.
Yeah.
By my calculation, 0.9. So we're at, if you average that out, we're at the 1%. 1%. Okay, so if we got to true zero, not net zero, because net zero is, it's pretty sketchy. The government is offering incentives now for us to plant trees or leave existing plantations, not cut them down to use them for their intended purpose, which is usually construction, right? They're saying, well, we'll pay you to leave them alone. This is part of their plan to get their net number down, because if you have all these trees. But what about, places like Queensland where conservationists have bought large chunks of forest and they've left it alone? I mean, I got to be honest. I said this many years ago, and I'll say it again. I feel as though we're moving closer and closer towards a carbon tax, and it's kind of like the John Howard. We're not going to bring in the GST, but here's the GST. So let's have a bigger look at this, right? So we've already worked out that making us all drive EVs is not going to save the planet, okay? But let's just have a really nuts and bolts type attitude towards this. Let's work out what the emissions of an EV are compared to a petrol car. Now, I'd just like to make this point. The Camry is Australia's best-selling car. The Hilux is the best-selling vehicle, but the Camry is the best-selling car.
Correct.
And most of those Hiluxes are on mine sites, right?
Yep.
So, we shouldn't enter into a discussion about that. They're on mine sites. They're not what mums and dads drive. Toyota Camrys are what mums and dads. And I think globally, there's an argument there to say that the Camry's got to be right up there, probably globally the best-selling car as a family sedan. So I think that's a good vehicle. I know a lot of people that are listening to this are probably having a chuckle because of our own, Camry project, but this has nothing to do with this. This is just facts. By the way, the Camry went 1180 on the weekend at 130 mile an hour with me shifting it into neutral. But anyway, it's another story. It's a story for another podcast.
Now, you wanted to talk about, what you wanted to talk about was comparing the, I pulled a Tesla out, Model 3, because that's probably arguably the
most popular
of the EVs that we have here in Australia.
And most comparable, I think.
And I pulled out the Camry as well. So there's a thing called the kilograms of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour coefficient. Now, interestingly, on your notes there, I get different figures for that, and that concerns me. That I get different figures for that depending on where I go and what I look at. In the end, I've gone with a different number here. I've got 0.68. And that changes the numbers slightly, but I've seen that number as high as 0.936 as well, and that does change. The amount of emissions that a Tesla would put out. So that in itself does concern me slightly. But basically, using the 0.936 as the coefficient in Western Australia, it's certainly higher in Victoria as well. The Tesla is on par, if not more, depending on the economy, than the Toyota Camry in terms of putting out emissions. If I use the better figure that's been published in the industry.gov.au...
Let me just stop you there for a second. Now, we're not talking about the CO2 to charge it. We're talking about what it consumes in the charge that it's got on board. Right? It's important to understand that when you convert anything, it doesn't matter if it's electricity or fuel, the energy that you get out is not going to be exactly the same.
No, yeah.
It's going to be less, right? That's just because there's losses.
Ohms came up with that a few years ago, that guy.
Yeah, that guy worked it out. There's been a lot of conservation of energy laws over time, over the last couple of 100 years. If you can feel the charger getting warm, then part of that energy is getting converted into heat. So if you're putting in 100 kilowatt hours, you're not going to get 100 kilowatt hours going into that battery, right? You're going to get a lot less. So you need to understand that even if it gets close to the same numbers as a Camry, the reality is that back behind the meter box, the numbers are worse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So that means that the EV is 100% emitting more CO2 than the petrol burning equivalent.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And as I said, with that coefficient, there are different numbers that are bandied around for different states. But I've put the better one in, but the numbers are still quite staggering. The Tesla emits 11.3 kilograms of carbon per 100 Ks. If I change that number to the 0.936, it's in your notes there. I don't remember what it was per the 100 kilometres. Yeah, it's 15. There you go. So it's 15.53 kilograms, and the Camry is 17. That's at worse as well. So 17.43 kilograms per 100 kilometres. So it all comes down to that coefficient figure there, and as you said, and we're not taking into consideration any losses.
The losses.
I've used 100% efficiency in charging there.
Yeah, and there's no way in the world you're going to get 100% efficiency between the meter box, and the charger. You're losing, and then between the charger and the battery, you're losing, and then pulling it back out of the battery and turning it into, motion, you're losing again. Now let's not get too carried away here, right? There's a very, very important point that I want to make about the efficiency of electric vehicles. Now, not only, did my brother and I build an EV well over 20, close to 30 years ago, but my brother and myself, we're both EV fanatics in terms of the performance side of things. I'm still in contact with a lot of the parts suppliers, and I would like to sometime in the near future build a high performance EV vehicle. I'm not going to do it because I want to save the planet. I'm going to do it because I think the technology is cool, and I believe that if you manipulate the motor correctly, then you should be able to exceed the performance of the petrol burning equivalent, right? But the thing that you need to remember is when you're driving an EV around the city, they are very, very efficient, right? It's because of regenerative braking. Every time you touch that pedal, the motors reverse and they put power back into the battery, okay? When you get out on the highway, you don't have that. And you can physically watch that gauge going down. And the faster you go, the more wind resistance, the faster that gauge goes down. Then enter into air conditioning and heating. On a petrol burning car, the heating is a waste product. They've got a radiator at the front of the car and a fan to cool the engine down. It's a byproduct of internal combustion, right? The combustion bit that generates the heat. So the heating is free. The cooling, they have an air compressor on the side of the motor, and the amount of load that it puts on the motor is fairly insignificant. Yes, it will have an effect on the mileage, but not as dramatic as an EV, where they have to have a separate electric motor to run the air conditioning system. It's not run off the primary motor. If they did, every time you stopped, your air conditioning would stop, right? Then you've got the fan. On a car, on a petrol-burning car, the battery is there just primarily for starting. There's an alternator that charges that battery while the engine's running. So things like fans, like brake lights, like headlights, they don't really have an effect. It's minuscule, if any, effect to the fuel consumption. On an electric vehicle, all of that stuff is draining the battery. It is all draining the battery. And the reality is, the more of that stuff you have on, so for example, it's nighttime, we've got our windscreen fogged up, we have the aircon and the heater on, and we're driving down the highway, the battery consumption is going to be phenomenal
with our lights on.
With our light, well, it's night time. You would have your lights on, I would imagine.
Yeah. No, you make a very valid point there, and one that that they can't hide behind that one. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was I'd like to know, has anyone that has an EV actually done the maths and worked out how much it costs them to charge the vehicle in their house?
I don't think anyone would have, because I don't think they want to know.
This surprised me. This number surprised me. Again, I'm happy to be proven incorrect, but I've checked this a number of times. So electricity in WA, this is in WA, of course, is charged out at 38.9 cents per kilowatt hour in Western Australia. Using the Tesla Model 3, I've averaged its consumption, right? So in kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres, I've taken their worst and their best and averaged it out. So it'll cost you $28.25 to completely charge your Tesla, assuming you're going to get the 461 kilometre range. That's assuming you're going to get the 461 kilometres. So every 461 kilometres, that car is costing you $28.25. That is a phenomenal figure.
I think we're one of the cheapest in the country too.
Yeah, we are. But even in Western Australia, that I don't think many people have taken that number into consideration. A lot of people say to me, but they're free to run.
They're not free, mate. There's no such thing as a free lunch or a free charge.
Yeah, so that number there, I think if people really understood that $28, I know that's a lot cheaper. You're not going to get $28 worth of fuel to get you 461 kilometres, but still, that is a finite figure on the household budget, especially on a car that's cost you $69,000 to buy up front.
Well, this is where we're headed. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you know when an agenda is being pushed and there's something a little bit suspicious about it. Okay, so we're starting to see state governments offering incentives, financial incentives for people to switch to EVs.
Yep.
Okay. There's a lot of problems with the EV transition. The first one is that we've all been through this recently as a result of the war in Ukraine. The fuel prices went through the roof. The former Morrison government dropped the fuel excise. The fuel excise, when you see a sign on the side of the road and it says federally funded road project, that means that 30 cents, roughly, 32 cents, something like that per litre that you're paying at the Bowser has gone into building that road, basically, right? We're going to have to go to a kilometre-based system with EVs, and they're going to have to factor that into the cost of running an EV, right? The next thing is the battery. Now, we're hearing a lot of this rhetoric is coming from the Climate Council and from the EV lobby groups. It isn't coming from engineers, right? Which worries me. We're hearing that, pardon me, we're hearing that they're offering 10-year warranties on the batteries, and that they guarantee the battery will be at 90% efficiency in 10 years' time. I find that really, really hard to believe, because if that was the case, if the technology existed for that, then why is it that mobile phone batteries, they die? We've all got a mobile. We've all experienced it. Most of us will buy a new phone for that reason. Nick knows me quite well. He knows that I'll just get a new battery fitted because I like my old phone. What are we going to do with those batteries after? So the talk of recycling has come up quite a lot. And I have heard people which clearly don't know what they're talking about say that, you just plug a computer into them and reprogram them. I'm not sure of the exact terminology. I think it's a dendrite crystal. But what I can understand is over time, lithium-ion batteries form these crystals, and the battery's basically throwaway. So the recycling then, there's a few problems in that. The biggest component of the battery is the casing that separates all the cells. And that's made out of plastic, okay? You then need to pull all those cells out individually, and then you need to go through some sort of process to separate the parts. Now, we're hearing a lot of talk about lithium, the lithium industry, lithium mining, but lithium is a very, very small percentage of the battery. Most of the battery is actually nickel. So you've got all these metals there that we need to separate. Now, once again, you've got to look at the cost versus benefit, and the reality is that those batteries are going to end up in landfill because it's just not that simple to separate those elements, and you've still got all that plastic to deal with. The cells are all individually wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
Then you've got the plastic frame that the batteries are held together with. I just feel that, if we do this, we need to talk about all this stuff now, get it out in the open, come up with solutions for it, and then we can go to this transition.
Yeah. Did you know that only 2% of lithium-ion batteries in Australia at the moment are recycled? 2%. So
yeah, I'm even surprised the number's that high, to be honest with you.
So I mean that begs that question as well. I don't think these things have been thought through, as you said, very well, and that's the purpose of this podcast tonight, is to ask our listeners to consider these things that we put forward. We need to be very clear about what we're saying here tonight, and I don't want to come across as an EV hater, because that's not what we're about.
No, definitely not. If anything, I would say that I'm the opposite. Like I said, I have every intention of building another EV sometime in my lifetime, because the great thing about the electric motor is that you've got 100% torque at 0 RPM. But to say that, number one, we can transition when we don't have the power grid, we don't have the power supply, we just don't have the wiring to do it.
Yep.
Number two, to say that that's the industry that we should be targeting, that we, by doing this, we're going to save the planet. Well, number one, we're 1% of the global problem. And number two, 50% of our 1% is mining.
Yep.
So they've got the area to do it, they've got the money to do it, and they've got the equipment. Like I said, the electric mining, like not just the trucks, the face shovels, the drag lines, a lot of those things are already diesel over electric. You eliminate the electric motor and you run a cable to them.
Yep.
It's, the dump trucks, you have a battery pack that slides in. And, the other thing that we didn't mention, Australia cops it a lot from other countries, because they say, well, yeah, you're only 1%, but your per capita emissions are huge. Your per capita emissions are higher than the US. Well, there's a lot of trucks running around that are autonomous. There's not even a driver in them. You can't say, well, your truck's emitting X amount of CO2. Well, it's not your truck. It belongs to the mining company, And if you look at it that way, if you eliminate the 50%, you say, let's discount mining, let's take it out of the equation. Now what's our per capita number? Our per capita number is pretty good then.
Pretty good.
It's very, like we're right down the bottom. We're in the Swedens and, countries like that.
Yeah.
So, we're really getting tarred with the wrong brush here. What they should be focusing on is saying that, look, the mining companies in Australia are a big problem. And this is a global thing. If you want us to get to net zero, then globally, France, for example, that tries to put pressure on our politicians to sign up to these accords and so on, they should be saying to the politicians, hey, do something about your mining. Tell them to clean up. Tell them to convert to EVs. The technology's been around for 100 years. hurry up and do it. They can afford to buy the battery packs. They can afford to put up the solar arrays. They got enough land there. They can explore all sorts of green technology. Yeah. And, they've got the $70 billion a year profit margin. Probably if you take mining and nickel and everything else into it, they're probably profiting over $100 billion a year.
Yeah. One thing I just want to double back on, because I've just checked my notes a bit better here. So in Victoria, we're going back to this kilograms of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour coefficient. I actually found the number. So for Victoria, it's 1.13. That changes the maths quite significantly. Now, this is from the Essential Services Commissions of it says Department of the State Government in Victoria. So that's where that number comes from. That was in 2020, 1.13 kilograms. So the Tesla in Victoria, if I'm charging up the Tesla, at best, it emits 16.83 kilograms of carbon. At worst, it's 18.75 kilograms of carbon. This is per 100 kilometres. So that actually makes it worse than the Toyota Camry.
Yeah. The numbers that you gave earlier, it was about 2 kilograms better.
Yeah. That was using a different coefficient figure of Western Australia. Yep. I'm not saying that's correct either. That's what I get from industry.gov.au. But this figure from the state government of Victoria has it at 1.13. Again, happy to be proven corrected on that, but that's just our maths suggesting that. And again, I feel like I'm bashing Tesla. It's not about bashing Tesla. It's just about picking a car out that's comparable.
You would argue that that's the most popular EV, and the Camry's the most popular petrol-burning car at this point in time. When this is recorded, September 2022. That's where we're at.
And both vehicles are of a similar size as well.
Correct.
Similar payload.
The next thing is the fires, the safety. The safety of EVs and lithium-ion batteries. First things first, we're talking about a lot of voltage. We've got 240 volts at the plug. Some of these EVs run well over double that. I think some are running 600 or 700 volts. Now, no one should get near that part of the vehicle, but it's something to think about that I've heard EV rhetoric where they say, people are driving around with a Molotov cocktail underneath them, referring to a petrol vehicle. Well, you're driving around with a power station underneath you with an EV. Now, the other thing is, I myself have had 2 lithium-ion batteries fail. They didn't fail because there was something wrong with the battery or the dendrite crystals formed and shorted the battery. They failed because of a very, very simple charging issue. Okay, so lithium-ion batteries have to have some sort of control module that governs the power in and out, because if they get too much power dump too quickly, the battery will fry and possibly explode. And if they get too much power coming in too quickly, the same will be. And this particular charger that I had this little trick where if you plug the battery into the charger and then plug the charger into the power socket, it tricks the battery and it does a bit of a charge dump. The reason that it has this facility is because if you run a lithium-ion battery dead, certain brands, I'm not saying this is the case for all the bands, the little circuit will cut it off, right? And then to get that battery back so that the circuit can do its job, you need to give it a little bit of a push, basically. And that's, what this charger does, okay? Now, I wasn't aware of this. There was nothing in the paperwork to suggest that, although it did say that the correct procedure is to plug the battery into the socket and then plug it into plug the charger into the socket, plug it into the battery, okay? What happened was that we had a power outage while it was charging. So what happens there is the charger turns off, it's still plugged into the battery. The power comes back on, it does its little trick. And lucky for me, nothing bad happened, but it burnt a hole straight through the center of the battery, right? I was very, very fortunate. So I went to get on the vehicle that this battery's on. It didn't work. It had no power. I removed the battery and contacted the manufacturer, and they said, you must have done this. And I said, no. And there was a power outage, and that must have caused it, okay? The second time it happened was similar circumstances. I had one of these batteries in a motor vehicle, powering the motor vehicle. The boot had been left open. The battery had drained overnight. I jump-started the vehicle. Inadvertently, I've done the same thing now.
Yeah.
I've done exactly the same thing. I've just dumped a heap of power. That open-circuited the battery. The car started. Car's running now. The electricity from the alternator is now being dumped into the lithium-ion battery. The battery caught on fire in the boot of the car. I had to reach into the battery, reach into the boot, disconnect the battery and pull it out. It was a molten mess. I grabbed it by the cables. Now, I don't know what's emitted when one of these batteries fails, but the paint on the inside of the boot peeled off. And
wow.
I feel that I now have a respiratory problem from those gases because I did breathe in some of those. Since that day, my throat's never felt the same again. Now, the other side of this is how these batteries operate when they're burning. They don't need an oxygen source like petrol does. So I can't remember the exact temperatures, but I think petrol burns at around about 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. Lithium burns at about 10 times that from memory.
Yeah.
So you've got this uncontrollable fire that's emitting this toxic fumes, and you can't put it out with any of the firefighting equipment that we've got at the moment. In Europe, they've been working on these carbon fibre blankets. Basically what they do is they pull the blanket over the car, they put some safety bunding around it, and they let it burn.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw that article in the US. They had to dig a hole and fill it up with water and then throw the car in there.
It would have kept on burning.
I think it went on for a few days, but yeah, it was the only way to keep it safe. And there's a picture of that there. I'll post that on our social media. If you're watching the video, there's a picture of it right there. One of the interesting things I felt like the Climate Council, and I've got nothing against the Climate Council, but I don't like some of the subliminal messaging they put on their website. So there's a picture of I think it's EK or maybe FC maybe.
Yeah, I think it's FBFC.
Yeah, rusting or missing bits out in the bush in the middle of nowhere.
I'd love to know where that is because I'd restore that. and if you being a true conservationist, that's what you do.
That's right.
You take an old rusty relic,
yeah,
bring it back to life, and you've reduced your emissions. You've reduced your emissions globally by doing that.
And the headline underneath this picture is Climate Council calls for auto peak body to stop blocking the road, in inverted commas, ahead of EV summit. And they've used that picture there. And I just think that's, there's subliminal messaging there for, even in schools now, EV is touted as the future. And a lot of kids in that sort of 11 to 15-year-old bracket believe that, that is the future, and the petrol burning vehicles, the internal combustion engine, we shouldn't be using those anymore. We should be phasing them out. And while I agree, I understand where the schools are at and they have to be taught these sort of lessons. I think the messaging is incorrect at the moment. I don't think that's correct, and I won't mention the school. But I did want to go down and speak with a teacher at one stage because some of the homework that came home was just factually incorrect. Factually incorrect.
The other side, I mean, you know, you don't have to worry about it at that age. My kids are 3 and 4, and you know, I think that at that age you should just let kids be kids, but they are continually being bombarded with information about pollution and so on, and I don't think that's fair. If you're worried about suicide rates in kids, maybe you should take that into consideration.
Yep.
That you know, let them be kids first.
Yep.
We've got 18 years old as the required age to be considered an adult and to be allowed to have a drink. Maybe wait until they're at 18 before you start trying to, you know, put this stuff into their head.
Make them save the world.
Yeah, you know, and the doom and gloom that's associated with it. The other thing is that, you know, as we were growing up, we saw the car as freedom. You know, we could get in the car, we could go to the beach, we could go to the drive-ins, we could go see our friends. It's been vilified. It gets blamed for all manner of things. And the reality is that we wouldn't have anything that we've got if we didn't have vehicles.
Yeah.
You know, like a bulk of our money in Western Australia does come from mining, and that mining wouldn't exist without vehicles. You need vehicles for that to operate, and you need vehicles that can go thousands of kilometres. So I've done the Nullarbor trek several times myself, and I've done it without stopping at service stations. We've loaded up some 44-gallon drums with fuel in the back, and we've filled up as we've gone along.
Yeah.
That's the freedom that the vehicle, the internal combustion powered vehicle, gives you. The EV is going to be reliant on where and when you can get power, and then you will be forced to wait while it charges. Getting back to the charging, I would really like to read the fine print on these warranties, because my understanding is that if you continually fast charge an EV, the battery life is shortened considerably faster than slow charging it. And if you slow charge it, I think it takes days to actually...
Yeah, it's not one day. It's more than one day.
Yeah.
On a standard 240-volt power point, yeah.
Now, I guess the first thing is we talked about this. We started talking about this to analyse it, having a holistic approach, okay? So what we've established is, number one, transport shouldn't be on the agenda. Mining should be on the agenda. That's what we should be focused on. So I encourage everyone that's listening to this, watching this, and I should have said this at the beginning of the podcast, share this on social media, send links to your friends, get them to listen to this, because, and, you know, get on climate.org. Do your own research with dump truck emissions, with face shovel emissions, with dragline emissions. Try and get a better picture and understanding of just how much CO2 is emitted by the mining industry in Australia. I'm not talking about globally, because globally it's shocking. I read some stuff today that copper mining in Chile, I think it was, accounted for over 80% of their CO2 emissions. You know, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So do your research and push back. We need to get together, all of us, and push back against this. We are still the majority. We don't want this to be another one of those situations where the noisy minority that's being funded, you know, because at the end of the day, if we were going to have full disclosure, we should see where the lobbyists are getting their money from, because then you understand why they're doing it. They're not doing it because they believe in the cause. Anyone that thinks that about politics has an unrealistic a complete misconception of how the world works. These people do it because there's money involved. They're getting paid to do it. Lobbyists get paid. It's as simple as that. They're funded by the industry they're lobbying. So, it's easy for these types of things to get pushed through in the name of good, but whether they actually achieve any of that is a different story. So we need to write to the ministers. We need to start forming groups to protest this. We need to say, hey, leave mum and dad's Camry alone. Go after the dump trucks. Go after the mining companies. Just the power generation for the mine sites just to run the dongers and the air conditioners is phenomenal. Yeah. It's phenomenal. Hundreds of thousands of litres of diesel every day get burned up by these mine sites. That's what you need to target. If you are genuinely trying to reduce our CO2 emissions, that's what you need to target. Now, you need to understand, anyone listening to this has to really stop and think about this. We're talking about one planet. There's only one planet. So even if we got our 1% and we reduced it to zero, there's still 99%. So the big emitters, China and the US, they're the two big players. China is, well ahead of the curve in terms of their emissions. Instead of just focusing on our own policies, why aren't we implementing policies to force those countries into reducing their emissions? Why don't we implement tariffs? If you're emitting 36% of the CO2 globally, then your products should be taxed. It's as simple as that. So if the government's looking at implementing a carbon tax, start there. Start taxing the countries' products that emit the most CO2. Throw big tariffs on those countries. Now, you're saying, well, that's going to hit the end user. And what do you think? Switching to EVs isn't? The fact that in summer you won't be able to turn your air conditioning on because we'll be on some sort of power share power restriction. I've heard horror stories out of countries like Spain where they've tried to fast track this by shutting down coal-powered fire stations. And, people are dying because they can't get heating or cooling. Yeah. They can't cook their dinner. They have no way of cooking their dinner. That's the kind of post-apocalyptic Australia that we're looking at if we rush into this. And there's no reason to do it. There's absolutely no reason to do it. If you just dealt with the mining, you'd hit your 50% easily with plenty of time. The mines could adopt this stuff in a couple of years. They could switch to full electric in a couple of years. The technology's out there. It's just a matter of, you guys don't do an electric truck. These guys do. We're going to order them from them from now on. We have to do this. We have to do this for our children. We have to do this for ourselves.
Yep.
We can't keep on listening to this rhetoric and if you see someone and they're saying you're a climate skeptic, you're a climate denier, just say to them, no, I'm not. It's just that my car is practically nothing compared to the mines. And why are you standing here worried about my car when there's a dump truck that in 1 hour has put more CO2 into the atmosphere than 5,200 Camrys.
5,362.
5,300. Nearly 5,500 Camrys. And that dump truck runs 24/7. Yep. And there's thousands of those dump trucks running around all over mine sites in Australia. You think about it, 38,000 people work in mining, right? And there's a lot of autonomous trucks on top of that. That's just to give you a bit of a scale of how much we're talking about. It's just unbelievable, and no one's talking about it. Well, it seems as though you and I are the only two people in the 25 million people who live in this country that are talking about mining and the fact that they are the biggest contributor of CO2. And it just makes me sad that we've gotten to this point. Have we missed anything, Nick?
I don't believe so. I think we've covered the notes quite well.
And I'd just like to put it out there again. I have written to the Climate Council and I've written to the Minister and the CSIRO and told them, we're going to be recording this. Would you like to comment? Would you like to come on the show? Would you like to be involved in the discussion? And I have not received a reply from any of them. We need to get this out there, so that these people start to take our questions. If they've got legitimate answers, if we're wrong, then hey, I'm here to listen to it. I'm here to hear what they've got to say, because I do want to. I've got a 3 and a 4-year-old. I do want the planet to be around in 100 years' time.
Of course,
I don't want the islands in the South Pacific disappearing because the water levels have risen. But I don't think that there is a shred of evidence saying that if everyone went and bought a EV, that it would have any impact at all. I think that there's plenty of evidence here to say that it would actually make things worse. And that really, really concerns me.
Yep. No, agreed. And I think that actually sums up the whole podcast, that final 2 sentences you just said then. That really does sum up everything we've been trying to say in this podcast, is that, we're looking down the barrel of making the government or the Climate Council, whatever lobby group you want to say, is asking Australians to make a $69,000 investment at the very least into something that will cause more harm to the environment to start with.
In the future, when we have enough renewables, we have enough solar panels, we have enough wind farms, then I feel that there's going to be some tipping point where it makes sense. But you can't discount the waste in the batteries. You can't discount the waste in the way the cars are designed. The front end of a Tesla is made out of die cast. If you have a smash with that car, they're probably going to throw the whole car away. It's just not repairable. Die cast, you can't weld it. For those of you that aren't familiar with die cast, a Hot Wheels car is made out of die cast.
Honey Pot's made from die cast.
There you go.
The shifter on the XW. Remember that?
Yeah.
That's die cast. We had all sorts of fun with that, didn't we?
Yeah. You can't weld that. You can't do anything with it. So you've got to take into account the waste, and things like the transformers. As new technology comes along, that stuff's going to be obsolete. A $20,000 battery charger. It's not a transformer; it's a solid state deal. It's if you're talking about waste from things like laptops and mobile phones, imagine the piles of battery chargers. I mean, all of this stuff. It's just and like I said, you look at that rusty car that the Climate Council used as their advertising. I look at that and I see a project where you can bring that back to life. You're not going to be doing that with an EV that's got a dead battery in it. I just think it's the wrong move, and I feel that we need to be talking about this. We need to make sure that the politicians hear our voice. So share this, talk about it in your office, at your workplace, at your sporting grounds, junior footy, hockey. Talk about it. Talk to other parents. The Great Escape, traveling from here to wherever. It's not going to be viable. There's not going to be. And you know what? If you come across a charging station on the side of the road, it's probably going to be diesel powered.
Yeah.
You know, so there's irony in itself.
Yeah. No, agreed. Can you imagine like going to Exmouth, towing your boat up to Exmouth, like so many thousands of West Australians do this time of the year? They tow their caravan and boat up to Exmouth. Like, I mean, that's just not a viable option in an EV. In not even the next 50 to 100 years, I wouldn't think that that's a viable option.
I should have been reading through these notes while we were recording this, but where I brought up the dangers of the EV versus the internal combustion powered vehicle. So petrol fires burn at approximately 260 degrees Celsius. So a little over 2.5 times what your kettle boils at, right? EV batteries burn at over 10 times that temperature at approximately 2,700 degrees Celsius. You know, that's just, I mean, can you imagine being trapped in a car with one of those batteries frying underneath you?
No.
There is no metal that I know of that would, you know, and then you've got the fumes that you're dealing with as well.
Yeah.
I'm not really comfortable with, you know, putting my family in something like that. And, you know, we see suppression of a lot of this stuff in the media. I think that if this transition does happen, and, you know, it's going to get to the point where they can't hide this, you know, people will die.
Yeah.
And you can't just say that it was a motor vehicle accident. It's going to be an EV specific accident. So I think it's important that when this starts to happen, if we don't manage to stop it, if we don't manage to push the focus over to mining, right? And, you know, I'll just make another point here with regards to mining. If we manufactured steel in Australia rather than sending the gas and the iron ore to China and then buying the steel and sending it back to Australia, we would go a long way to reducing the carbon dioxide footprint. We would go a long way to saving the planet, because we have the natural gas and we have the coal and all the other minerals that we need, the manganese in Australia, and we have the iron ore here. So to build a steel manufacturing plant in the northwest makes absolute perfect sense, right? Right now we've got these huge iron ore carrying ships that run on bunker oil. Now, bunker oil is the bottom of the barrel when it comes to oil. They actually need to heat it to get it through the pipes to get it into the engine. So when you see these ships rolling out of port, they're running on, you know, pretty clean fuel. Once they get out of eyesight, they switch over to the bunker oil, and there's basically columns of black soot coming out of the chimney stacks. Now, there's been some efforts by the Maritime Association, or whatever they call themselves, to reduce the emissions of these boats, because it is having a negative effect on the oceans. But they're talking about the sulfur content. They're not talking about the CO2.
Yeah.
If you saw how much CO2 those boats pump into the atmosphere, you'd be astonished. If we made the steel in Australia, we'd be, you know, effectively halving the amount of CO2 that it's giving out by the boats, because the boats would then be carrying finished product steel to China for their manufacturing, and on top of that, it'd be providing Australians with jobs. You know, we could cut down on the mining and get back into manufacturing rather than sending the raw ingredients offshore and then buying them back at a, you know, greatly increased cost as a finished product.
Yeah.
And I think policies like that make a lot more sense than, you know, saying Putin's doing us a favour. I mean, that's the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard.
I'm sure it was in jest, and I'm sure it was sarcasm.
You can find the clip on the internet, and he was, he didn't look like he was joking when he said it.
Yeah, okay. All right, Simon. Well, look, that brings this one to an end. Perfect timing, actually. You're right on time. So for those of you that have watched this podcast, I urge you to share it, as Simon said. Tell your friends about it. Repost it, reshare it on Facebook if you can.
Look at the numbers yourself. Do the maths yourself. Have a look at the consumption per kilometre and compare it to the CO2 emitted in each state from power generation. If we switched everyone over to EV, all that would happen is our electricity CO2 emissions would go up, and they would go up by more than what the car emissions are.
Yep. But yeah, and if you have any questions, email us info@talkandpower.net, or send us a message on Facebook as well, or go to our website. We've got a contact us page there, and I can send you through. If you have any questions about how we come up to the numbers, send a message through. I can send you through the numbers. If you disagree with the numbers or you think we're grossly incorrect, let us know as well.
100%.
We're not here to say that we're not scientists. I'm not a scientist. But we've done the maths on face value and believe that what we've been presented is dubious, to say the least.
And one thing I'd like to say is that from our many years of being involved in motorsports, one thing that we both do very, very well is crunch the numbers.
Yep.
Because everything that we've played with in the past, we've had to sit down and work out the maths to make it, to the point now where we can basically predict what's going to happen before we even start the project. And these numbers are out there. You need to look. You need to look hard. And that's the other thing. If it's not as obvious as what we're saying it is, why aren't the numbers that easy to find?
Yeah, that's right.
And why is there so many discrepancies between, they're two of the major national bodies and their numbers are different. And they're not a little bit different. They're way different. Then you've got the Climate Council saying the transport's number 2 when that's one thing they do agree on. It's definitely not number 2. You know what I mean?
Yes. So, yeah, share it around. Thanks for tuning in. This episode, if you're listening to us on the podcast or on the radio, you can watch it on YouTube as well. There's a video there as well. It's exactly the same podcast, but you can watch us as well. So go back there, have a look. Also on 88.5 FM every Saturday morning from 8:30 to 10. All right, Simon, thanks for coming in. Greatly appreciate it.
Apologies again for the coughing, but I think this is a very important subject.
Yep.
And I had to come in and be part of this, even though I'm not feeling the best, because we need to get the word out there. We need to act on this before it's too late.
Yep.
If we don't do anything about this, it's going to be a catastrophe and we're all going to suffer. And I don't want my family or anyone else's family to suffer because some politician was getting a backhander in a back room somewhere. We need to put an end to all this rhetoric, and the truth needs to come out. The truth is out there.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Simon. Thanks for coming in. We'll catch you in a couple of weeks' time.
Talk and Power, your motorsport and motoring radio show. Now on 88.5 FM, The Valley Comes Alive. And podcasting across iTunes and talkandpower.com.au.